Thank you all for joining us for the Walk with Christ procession for the Solemnity of the Most Holy Body and Blood of Christ, Corpus Christi. First, the construction of the George Street tram, and then the COVID pandemic and associated limitations on public gatherings have in recent years interfered with this particular tribute of love and public witness. So it's great to be back together. I acknowledge today the presence of my auxiliary bishops, the Most Reverend Terry Brady, Richard Umbers and Danny Marr, as well as clergy, religious and lay faithful who help to organise and prepare and assist in our procession today. To outsiders unfamiliar with Catholic practices, today's procession may have seemed a little strange. On tonight's news, we might hear that despite the weather, thousands of people were out demonstrating in Sydney earlier today, but no one could work out what it was they were against. Instead of chanting, "What do you want?" and "When do you want it?" they had other mysterious chants going on. And up front there were some weird religious guys carrying something shiny with a big shade over them to keep the weather out. Whatever it wasn't an everyday happening in the harbour city. Processions were much more familiar to the ancients. They celebrated something, an event or a person. And behind these celebrations sat deeper beliefs about themselves and their world. For this reason, sociologists consider all processions to be rituals, events that express a particular view of reality, certain values, hopes, expectations, and that use earthly symbolism to express transcendent realities. The ancient Romans were famed for their triumphs after military victories, joyously carrying the spoils of war through the city, their heroes on horseback and their enemies in chains, to the thunderous cheers of the people. They thereby celebrated their belief that they were the most powerful military force on earth and the greatest civilization in history, and that their gods, Apollo, Ceres, Juno and Mars, were well pleased. The ancient Egyptians had extravagant funeral processions, celebrating the deceased, their past and future. The corpse was elaborately prepared, various funerary goods also, and the mummy in its inner coffin solemnly escorted with sacred symbols and chants to the tomb. All this demonstrated the Egyptians' fascination with death, understood not simply as the end of life, but as entry into the afterlife. The ritual connecting them with the gods and spirits who would guide the deceased through the challenges of their new existence awaiting them. In Britain, from medieval times to this day, there have been elaborate coronation processions marking the advent of a new monarch, not just consecrated and adorned with insignia of office, but displayed as sovereign so the people might show their respect. Again, this demonstrated beliefs: the sacred office of kingship, authority, law and order, Britishness. Carrying the celebration to the streets allowed the people to join in giving testimony to these beliefs, not just the lords and ladies that got inside the cathedral or palace. Arguably, the biggest procession in history was that of the people of Israel, for it involved a whole nation and lasted for 40 years. The line of Jews crossed through the sea, led by a pillar of cloud or fire, and Moses with his staff. As the procession went on, stone tablets with commandments on them led the way. And later, a ceremonial ark enclosed the stone law and the very presence of God. Soon they added trumpets and priests in special garb, poles to carry the ark, and elaborate decoration around it, and it would be brought even to the scene of battles. The procession celebrated Israel's liberation from Egypt, the promises that God had made to them, and their undertakings back to God. So what about our Eucharistic procession today? What does it say about what we believe? In the simplest terms, it is the visible, public expression that we, above all, are Christians, followers of Christ, our way and truth and life, as we followed behind him today. It also affirms that the God we worship loves us so profoundly and intimately that he gave his only Son, and that Son took our flesh and dwelt amongst us. What's more, he gave up his life on the cross for us and for our salvation, foretelling and memorialising this by giving his body and blood to us in the Eucharist. Here we meet a God and man, whose love for us is so total, he would give us everything he is, his divinity and his humanity, his body and soul, his flesh and blood, his very substance and being, to be part of us. In the recent biopic, Father Stu, Mark Wahlberg plays a foul-mouthed, boozing boxer turned would-be actor turned seminarian following a life-threatening motorcycle accident when he was converted by a vision of the Virgin Mary. But it emerges that he has a rare and incurable degenerative illness, the muscles, like motor neuron disease. Angry at first with God, Stu comes to understand his suffering as a gift, drawing him closer to the suffering Christ. When he begins losing the use of his limbs, the rector tells him he cannot be ordained. But parishioners petition for his ordination and the bishop agrees. Doomed to a short and limited ministry, he cares for his family, friends, seminarians, prisoners and patients before dying, aged only 50. But to have offered even one Mass makes it all worthwhile from the point of view of eternity that he had come to embrace. Our procession today, like the processions of old, tells who we are and in relation to God, who is sovereign in our lives, what it is makes sense of our lives and deaths, what matters most to us. It doesn't just reveal these things, it proclaims them publicly for all the world to see and hear. As we took the Lord through the streets, past business, commerce, past Parliament and the law courts, past Sydney Hospital, and so many other aspects of the life of our city and nation, we said to them all, "You need Christ," and we beg Christ to bless them all. Before we were called Catholics or even Christians, we were called followers of the way, This was because discipleship is about following a path more than reciting propositions. It's about a relationship with a person more than membership of a club. And walking behind him in his blessed sacrament says loud and clear that relationship, that following, that whole of life commitment, like Israel's 40-year-long procession through the desert. Whole of life commitment, I say. Whole of life and of death and of eternity beyond. For the procession we join is that of Palm Sunday, with palms and praises of this King of Kings. That of the way of the cross, from his arrest and trial, torture and execution to his tomb. That of his rising from the tomb and from the earth to heaven. To follow the way is to walk that path with him, with the lows of a procession of the enslaved and of the dead, to the highs of a celebration of victory, liberation, coronation. And it is to make his way ours, his path, our way to heaven.